is it fair? No. But, it's the price that you have to pay for having cheap food. And food is cheap.
Yeah.
Even though you might be feeling it's expensive, compared to the cost of production, it's very cheap.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Take two. We've just been chucked out the pub, the red line behind us, by one of the bouncers who said after 2 hours of podcasting, we're not allowed to film in the pub. So we decided to come outside and have a chat out here. And I was in the middle of asking Tom, should farmers have to pay their way like everybody else does? We're in central London. There are multi-million pound houses around here. When people die, they've got to pay their inheritance tax. Why don't farmers?
Well, okay, look, if you're investing... You wet wipe. Look, farming sits in the category almost all of its own, whereby there's a huge amount of capital that's invested, millions, and from the outside looking in, somebody who is struggling with cost of living crisis, somebody who's looking at farmers who have millions of pounds sitting in assets, is going to think, why can't they pay their fair share? Yeah. But the bottom line is that because the cost of production is so close to what the sale price is for food, the produce that's being made by these farmers is not getting the profit margin it needs to reinvest in these businesses to ensure that they can earn enough to pay inheritance tax in the first place.
Yeah.
That's why there should be an exemption from it. And is it fair? No. But, it's the price that you have to pay for having cheap food. And food is cheap.
Yeah.
Even though you might be feeling it's expensive, compared to the cost of production, it's very cheap.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the big disparities that a lot of, the general public don't necessarily not necessarily understand, but don't necessarily appreciate, is the disparity between the value of land versus the actual income that you can generate off that land. Yeah. People look at farmers and think, well, you get 5 million quid's worth of assets, you've got 5 million quid to spend, but you don't.
No.
And that's a big thing that's been put over in the past few days, ever since the budget and here today as well.
I've seen plenty of people saying, quite rightfully, I'm not the first one to say it, is that it's like eroding your shop floor. Yeah. Every few years you sell off 20% of your shop floor. Soon you've got less space to sell things, you've got less opportunity to make money, and eventually you'll just be out of business.
Yeah.
And because farmers typically, even arable farmers who might have, 3 to 5 to multitude of different crops on their farm, they are still not selling anywhere near as much as what a normal business might. So their opportunities and their risk factors are so much more open to global markets, to changes in policy, cost of production. It's a very difficult industry, and I still understand why the British public don't see it. It's not something that's taught in schools. It's not something that too many people know too much about.
But is this, this for a lot of people, I think, is the straw that broke the straw that has broken the camel's back. But this has been years, if not decades, in the making, from previous governments, from low food prices, from dominance from the supermarkets, from lack of investment. This has been building over 20 years, the anger that you've seen today. Yeah.
I mean, realistically, successive governments, regardless of whether they're blue, red, orange, purple, whatever, they have not treated agriculture in the way it should be treated. And realistically, it's a public service which is owned by the private industry. It provides food security for the UK. It means that the public get low food prices. It means that they get a consistent source of food. It is a public service, and it's been maltreated by every government coming in.
But you don't have to go that far back in history to appreciate the importance of farmers and producing food in this country. Yeah. And one of the things, I've discussed it with a few people in interviews today, is in an increasingly uncertain world in where you have a new president-elect in America, you have Russia with a war in Europe, you have all the conflicts in the Middle East, you have China in a geopolitical landscape that's becoming increasingly unstable. As an island nation, why would you want to outsource or offshore a basic need for society and rely on another country for it? Why not invest in this country? Because that feels like what the Labour Party or what the government are doing here.
I don't think that's their primary intention. I think that they've terribly miscalculated this.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's an intentional direct attack on farmers in this instance. I genuinely think it's an attack on those people who have hidden their wealth in land and have made huge amounts of profits from the appreciation, environmental schemes, renting it out, whatever they've done with it. But the problem is their figures are so far off, they are encapsulating a vast majority of UK farms into that metric.
Yeah.
No farmer would be here if they got that right.
Yeah.
No one would be out here fighting for the bankers, the investors who've put money into land. These are everyday farmers who are going to be affected, and I genuinely think it is a miscalculation on their part. I don't think it's anything more malicious than that.
Do you think it stems from a severe misunderstanding as to how the industry works?
A systemic misunderstanding of agriculture.
And we heard that today with the fact that there's now, am I right in saying no Labour MPs with a rural background, or very few?
I couldn't say, to be honest with you.
I think that was something of that effect.
Yeah, I couldn't say. I mean, the thing is, there have been plenty of politicians who've had rural backgrounds who've really not really supported the industry very well. So I think the rot goes deeper than that.
Yeah. But where do you think we go from here? Because obviously today was a fantastic turnout. We've had 20,000+ farmers on Whitehall protesting for this, and it was an amazing turnout, and all credit to the organisers, we should say, to everyone that's been involved in the organisation. But we can all walk away from here, have a few pints in the pub and go home. Where do we go from here? Do you think the government are going to shift their thinking on this?
After this today, I don't think so.
No.
I think it's going to take more of a push. I'm not going to condone violence in any way, shape or form, and nor should any of us. But I think it's going to take a larger protest. I think it's going to take more action. And I think it's going to, we're going to have to pull the agricultural community together more so than we have done today. Today we've exceeded expectations by a mile. And again, credit to the organisers who put this together. But I don't think the government is going to shift on it based on today. I think we're going to need to do a lot more. This, today, is a great example of the agricultural community coming together and showing support for themselves. That is what it is today, and that will give a rousing voice for the rest of the industry to stand up and join in.
Because that's one of the criticisms around the farming industry, or us as an industry, is the fact that we've been unable to come together or stand united on certain topics. We saw protests in January, February, when it was happening on the continent, and were we going to do something in this country? And there wasn't any real burning flame there or cause to get around. Whereas we've seen today, you get 20,000+, 25,000+ people from all corners of the country. I mean, they come from Wales, Ireland, Scotland, everywhere to be here today, which can only be a sign for good and something to hopefully build on in the future.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing is, as an industry, you've touched on it, we are terrible at being a community together. We are horrific at it. You see the French as a perfect example of getting together and, taking action, whether that's supporting themselves as a community, whether that's changing government policy.
Yeah.
But we are so detached from each other within this country as a community, as an industry, that today has made, regardless of whether the government is going to change anything or not, today has been a massive positive for showing that we can stand together. Which is something we haven't done for many years. And hopefully this kickstarts change, at least in a positive way, for building an agricultural community together.
Because I think that's the optimist in me would say, and the optimist today have said that, whilst the budget was terrible and it's been a death knell for farming, the optimist would say, well, it should encourage succession talks sooner, etc., etc.
Yeah.
And as you say, it should encourage us to come together as one, as an industry, to put up a united front. And I would like to think that today has been a catalyst for that. Time will tell as to whether or not that's the case, but you can only be encouraged by what you've seen here today.
Absolutely. I mean, on that point, we should probably say that realistically, until we hear otherwise, until something may or may not change, anybody who's going to be affected by this really needs to seek good advice. So go to the consultant who's going to be able to support you. The biggest concern of that's not a plug. It's not a plug. I don't want to touch it, thank you.
0793.
No. Get good consultants. There are plenty of good firms in this country who can support you. And realistically, the greatest fear, there are plenty out there who cannot afford to do that, who are going to be in positions where they aren't aware of that sort of support because we are very disconnected as a community. And also the fact that there are plenty of farms out there who are just going to see this as, that's it. That's the final thing, I'm going.
I think that is a point that we should raise on this podcast, is seek professional advice. Don't make a knee-jerk reaction. I was at a conference last week where they were saying just that. One of the saving graces throughout the budget that's come from the budget is that they haven't changed the rollover relief. They haven't changed the 7-year rule. We do have time into April 2026 to, as an industry or on an individual farm level or on a family level, you have time to sort this out. So there are some glimmers of hope in there. But the key message is, don't panic. Seek advice and try and mitigate as much of this as possible.
I mean, this isn't what we should be focusing on right now as an industry. We should be looking into a new government to be a good push for good, a supportive network for farmers, and giving us the confidence to invest within our farms. Right now, I mean, seeing into the Farm Business Innovation Show, there is a lot of concern about investing anything into your business because you don't know where it's going to go right now. So that's not incentivizing farming. We need to be incentivizing farming, encouraging more people to come into it. This is not doing that.
And I think this will be a concern for everyone involved in the industry, those supplying into the industry, your manufacturers, all the rest of it, is that farm budgets were thin at the best of times. But this has taken another blow. It's another risk factor. It's another thing to save for or to put money aside for, which means less money that's going into the reinvestment and into these businesses. So everybody in the industry is going to be concerned.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, you know, there are plenty of farms, and the dairy industry is a very key example of this. They are already heavily leveraged against for new parlours, for facilities, and you know, bouncing on the bottom of their overdrafts as it is. You know, so this change gives such a lack of security for these businesses, and there are going to be plenty of guys who are working on farm and, you know, who are looking forward to taking over that farm and producing food for the nation, who are going to be thinking, why the hell should I bother if I'm just going to get penalised for it?
Tom, I'm going to let you back to your pint.
Thank you very much.
An absolute pleasure, my good man.